Welcome to the Health and Wellness Show, everyone, where we survive and thrive in a world of chaos. Dr. Danielle, a holistic and naturopathic doctor, and myself, Rhonda Wine, are your presenters today. Today we have an incredible group of guest speakers with us, Mr. Fred Van Loo, Mr. Vincent Dowd, Mrs. Cheyenne Kramer, Reverend Matthew Gardner, and Mr. George Milton. Welcome, everyone.
Well, welcome, everybody. So we're here to help entrepreneurs and businesses to get better known in the world of health. And health can be physical health, emotional health, mental health, spiritual health, even financial health. Back to you, Rhonda.
Thank you. I am the author of Stop the Junk and founder of Efficiency Secrets and MRS Health. Imagine your children eating food that is rationed to them, all chemically man-made, supposedly full of all the necessary vitamins and minerals, and yet your children remain unhealthy. Imagine there are no morals, no values, no rules, no authority figures, and no education. So Stop the Junk was written to help people become aware of junk or things that stop them from being the best that they can be. If you'd like a copy of that book, please email me at stopthejunkronda@gmail.com. We'd like to now go over to Dr. Danielle. She is a very special lady. She's a holistic and naturopathic doctor, as we've mentioned. She has a big heart for helping people. She's overcome some obstacles in life that most people wouldn't be able to handle. Please welcome Dr. D.
Hello, thank you, Rhonda. Yeah, some obstacles I faced was cancer, depression, weight problems, and being thrown in jail for 6 months in maximum security. So I had to survive lockdowns, right? And I got to test different strategies that I had learned to see what works and what doesn't work when we are in deep doo-doo. And I got a book that's called Activate the Power Within. And I'm turning it into an interactive book. So if you would like to get a copy, email me at mentorme.drd@gmail.com. All right, back to you.
Fantastic. Our first guest is Mr. Fred Van Loo, AKA the Water Doctor. He has studied how the body, the mind, and the spirit operate for the past 43 years. He's the world's leading expert in water, air, and energy as they relate to your health internally and externally. He's the founder of ewater.com and the PWB seminars and the wellness lectures. 4-star marketing director at Youngevity, former founder at Trinsol. Please welcome Mr. Fred Van Loo.
I appreciate that, Rhonda and Dr. Danielle. And just like to say, my purpose in life was unknown for a long time. It had so many paths, and I understood only later in life, after I'd already established almost 3 out of the 4 churches that I've been the worship leader at, and all 4 became healing ministries, and no intention of going that route. It just happened. 27 is when I came to know the Lord. But before that, I was extremely shy. I was an introvert, extreme introvert, by testing by Johnson O'Connor Human Engineering Laboratories. And, between being shy and highly dyslexic, undiagnosed, that is really tough to go through life when no one knows why. This great gap between intelligence and, performance, recalling information. And that all began to change. But even with that, you have ways of compensating. So I have a great empathy for the underdog. And one of the things was lack of self-esteem. And so very much so in my life, I did not have confidence or the self-esteem to move forward in ways that I would like to. And that came later through mentoring. So when you're talking about whether it's health, business, it doesn't matter. Your life, your marriage, having mentors is absolutely essential to success. People here on this, they're mentors, each one of them, in their specialty as well as people. And so when it came to health, it really hit home. I was dealing with health in all aspects, and very little with water. I had the largest carbon block made At the time, I moved down to Texas from Massachusetts. And my third child was born down here, and he nearly died after being born because something had messed his system up so badly, he couldn't even stand mother's milk. And for 6 months, I honestly had no idea what was going on. And this is very frustrating when you're dealing with health. And it was only after I was sent 550 pages of documents on fluoride court cases around the country, where all the judges were either pro-fluoride or neutral. Every single one of them had ruled it shouldn't be added to the water. This is horrific. This is more toxic than lead, only slightly more toxic than arsenic. But they all said, but it's out of our jurisdiction. It's in the health department. Politics is amazing, especially when it comes to our health. They try to take this away from us. We have medical tyranny in our country, in fact, in the world. And the allopathic has taken over the legal right to even use the word cure. And if they don't okay it, technically no one's supposed to have access. Well, who said? Oh, they said. So when we understand that basic fundamental truth, we might listen a little more carefully to those who aren't part of the medical tyranny. Now, I thank them very, very much because, you know, I've died twice in the last 3 years from challenges I created or were created in my first 30 years before I woke up. And high stress in my youth. I mean, I was drinking gasoline water every summer at a boys' camp for years. I mean, this spreading DDT barehanded under a medical doctor's supervision on an island in Maine. I mean, it blew my thyroid out. I didn't even know it until a few years ago. Brilliant doctor, naturopathic doctor, and with 7 other very legitimate degrees, PhDs, as well as medical and nutritional degrees. But he discovered what it was, gave me an herbal combination. He said, basically, it's going to knock you flat on your butt for about 10 days. Don't answer the phone. I answered the phone the first 2 days. Those people never have called me back because it turned me into a bear. But at the end of the 10 days, I mean, I'm the pussycat you now see. But it really did. It made all the difference. My thyroid came back. And, you know, I was operating at 24% for years. Had no idea. Just like I say, undiagnosed dyslexia. Look, we can achieve whatever we want, no matter what's going on. And people are managing to get through their lives with great difficulty, but they're getting through it in exhaustion right now. And they're exhausted because of all this electronic overwhelm. My first mentor in my teens was that medical doctor I talked about. He wanted me to become a medical doctor so bad. He said, Fred, you can only do what you want to do if you make enough money doing what you don't like to do. Well, I didn't know that I particularly liked that outlook on life, but there's a lot of truth to it. I mean, even I deal with a lot of sick people. Ask me if I like dealing with sick people. No, but it's the path I've chosen because I have solutions. I don't sell products. I hate selling products, but products are part of solutions. So for me, I move much more product than most people because I provide solutions to many, many more people. And my book, Adrenal Exhaustion and Chronic Fatigue, How to Stop the Nightmare. This I wrote over 10 years ago. I've updated it 4 different times. The most recent, you can find, don't buy the non-updated version on Amazon. You just pay $20, but it's so much better in the updated version, which you can get for free. Just go to highenergyhealing.com. That's highenergyhealing.com. And you can download it for free. And I'm telling you, you will find answers in that book you won't find anywhere else, particularly in the realm of the energy, how that affects healing. Now, believe it or not, even the allopathic, the medical tyrannists, they are working in the energy field. It's just so crude what they're doing, but they're getting closer. They're just a long ways away from where we are now. So your thoughts are one of the most powerful. You'll hear that, I'm sure, from others. One of the most powerful healers, and they're also one of the most powerful forces that make us sick. And traumas, both past and present, traumas get embedded in our DNA. That's my specialty. I clear all traumas to the DNA, which means permanently, in 5 to 15 minutes. I give a person the best night's sleep they've had in months or years in that period of time by getting rid of all those past traumas and other interference. Get rid of pain that they have not been able to get rid of for years. Boom, 70 to 100% in minutes. It's a joy to be able to do that. And when you remove the obstacle to the healing, then the nutrition, counseling, whatever it is a person is, they can respond to it. But when you have a dam or multiple dams blocking the healing, nothing happens. The water can't flow. The healing can't flow. So that's my specialty, is the dealing with poor sleep, fatigue, uneasy, touchy digestion, and lack of healing where it should be manifesting. And by helping people do that, working with the body's perfect intelligence, and that's the key, CHI as well as KEY, dealing with the body's perfect intelligence is where you get healing. When we try to tell the body what to do, which still far too many nutritionists try to do that, it just aggravates the body. If I told Dr. Danielle to do something that she knew was not what she needed and wanted to do, but I really was pushy, not that Fred Van Loo is pushy, this control freak here, but I say, you want to do this, and she knows she wants to do it. She gets aggravated. Now, your body is the same way. If you're going to aggravate your body, you think you're really going to get full healing? You'll get all the healing you want if you give the body a full toolbox to work with on a daily basis. And I've learned to master that with some of my great mentors. And then remove the obstacles. And here's the key. Today, most people have less than 1 out of 100 of their body and commensal cells awake or even showing up for work each day. People are trying to function with 1 out of 100, 200, or even 1 out of 400 cells showing up. The rest are asleep. Now, if you have a sleeping army, does it matter how much food you put next to them? So I try to tell the nutritionist, you got to wake the army up first. This is why your clients are not responding. Does it matter how many weapons you give a sleeping army? No, you got to wake them up first. So this is the key. Wake the army up, provide the full toolbox, and let the body's perfect intelligence, which God has designed every cell with a DNA that knows exactly what to do at any given moment, give it the toolbox. When it reaches down for that drill, it pulls out the drill and says, ha, I got it. And the right piece to drill the perfect hole. It doesn't have to pick up a screwdriver and punch an ugly hole. That's the key to real healing and permanent healing of anything. But everything you're going to hear here, there's never a silver bullet. I don't have a purple pill. I have complete solutions so that your body, which is much smarter than this whole panel put together, will do what it needs to do, can do what it needs to do. And we just have to get the obstacles out of the way. And one of those obstacles is usually us. Get out of the way, let it happen, feed your mind the good stuff. That is an absolute specialty of Rhonda's. Feed your mind the good stuff so that the good things can happen in your life, and you put out there what you want to receive. Now, I just threw a bunch of stuff out there that you're going to get more detail as these others do their presentations. But I highly recommend you get that book on highenergyhealing.com. In the back of it, all kinds of additional websites like ewater.com. Protecting yourself against 5G, this is just one of many different shapes. They're all unique. This is called the Amber Shield. It is the best protection on 5G you will find anywhere, but also all the other negative energies. If you don't protect yourself, who do you think is? It is very destructive. I don't have time to go into those details, but there's a lot more than 5G affecting you. But boy, 5G is kicking us on our butts right now. So you want to learn how to protect yourself. ewater.com. It tells you how long I've been doing water. The doctors themselves gave me that title because I became the only reliable source for accurate information for their patients on water, water treatment, water equipment, and I would tell them if they had good stuff or if they didn't, I'd tell them what to do. So my time is really up. I only have about 16 hours worth of additional information I would love to share with you. So get the book, it'll be a good start, and you'll find other resources where you can constipate yourself with as much knowledge as you really want. God bless you, and thank you for allowing me, the Water Doctor, to share with you. And you can reach me directly if you want at fred@ewater.com, fred@ewater.com.
That was fantastic. And I see that because he does have so much information, you literally could spend hours listening to this man. And so great job, Fred, and such a pleasure to have you on our show today. So thank you very much. And with that, Dr. D.
Hello, Vince. How are you doing?
Wonderful. Thank you so much for having me, Dr. D and Rhonda.
Yeah, I was on your website a few minutes ago, and you have quite a story. Can you kind of share that story in a few minutes?
I sure can. In fact, I put a little timer here just to make sure it was a few minutes. I'm a talker too. So that was great listening to Fred, first of all, phenomenal information. I totally agree. I've seen some of the journey that he's been on, I've shared, and I know the challenges with the frequencies and so forth. So definitely listen to what Fred says. For me, you know, I grew up in Denver, and I'm the third of three boys. And back in the 60s, my oldest brother drowned in a swimming pool. He was 6 years old. So I was born like a year and a half after that. And I was born into a family that was now dysfunctional with the tragic loss. And they were operating in an area of blame and shame and addiction and alcoholism. And so being born into that was very challenging. As you know, when you come into this life and you're born onto this planet, it's so critical because we are amazing beings that are having the ability to be, do, or have anything. And we're wondrous, and we're not really programmed to think at that point. But then what happens is the environment we're born into actually starts to program us. And since our brains are always looking for meaning, we tend to place meaning on the environment around us and the events that happen in our life. And coming from a child's mind, a lot of that meaning is incorrect and false, and that starts to build our false beliefs. So for me growing up, my dad was a tyrant, very angry, and I think a lot of that was the blame and the shame. And like Fred said, I did not know this until a few years back, but what's very interesting, and science shows this, is today we know that we are programmed even generations back from the trauma and the pain that our ancestors had, whether it be our mother and father or their grandparents. And they've even done a study with lab mice that shows that you can take lab mice and let them smell cherry blossoms, and then you electrocute them at the scent. And within a short time, when they have their offspring, the offspring are automatically triggered at the smell of cherry blossom, that they have fear in their body. So I agree with Dr. Fred in the sense that we carry within us trauma and family constellations energetically and in our DNA that is programmed. And a lot of our problems are not even our own. So looking at that and the way that I was born with epigenetics and the fact that my mom and my dad living in fear and shame were basically programming the cells before I was born, that's really what happens with a lot of us and the traumas that come up. So then I come into the environment where there's a lot of alcoholism, a lot of challenges. Needless to say, I struggled. I flunked kindergarten, and like Fred, they didn't call it dyslexia back when I was held back in kindergarten. They just said I'm special. And I thought that was something good, but it turned out to be the short bus. And so I kind of learned along the way that I wasn't very good at school, and but I made it through. And my mom and dad broke up when I was 4 years old, and my dad actually pulled a gun on my mom and myself and my brother and threatened to kill us. So that night we slept in a station wagon in the field in Colorado on a cold night while my mom cried in the front seat trying to figure out what she's going to do because she had no money. And my dad paid the bills and so forth. So she came home that next day, stepped into her fear and told him to leave. And didn't really see my dad much after that, but we did have a financial issue of no money, but a lot of bills. And I'm sure if you're out there, if you've ever experienced that, you know the pressure and the stress, and that goes from the parent to the child in a lot of cases. So that was really challenging environment as well. And so I grew up with this low self-image and eventually joined the martial arts at 12 years old. And that really helped me to build some self-discipline, some confidence. And I just wanted to get rich. You know, what I realized was this, that my mom worked so hard and she cried every week because she couldn't pay the bills. And I remember even at Christmas, she said, I can't buy you what you want because I just can't afford it. It'll come from the light bill or some kind of bill. And I understood that, but then she would go buy me what I wanted. And I felt guilty that I, wanted a present when we couldn't pay the bills. So these kind of programs were building up in me. And I just said, what I want to do is I want to go become wealthy so that I can take care of my mom. I don't want her to cry anymore. I want her to have the money like other people in life. And that was my journey. I went after making money. And so I started trading the stock market in 1995 and got very good at that, made a lot of money. And then I became a speaker, actually teaching people how to trade the financial markets, and traveled all over teaching people. And then I was actually, from that point, you know, success breeds success. And I ended up getting in real estate and, you know, taught people on that as well. And I had a big crash though that happened. And the crash was this. First, if you remember the 2000 crash of the stock market, I lost about 70% of my portfolio. So I went from thinking I was a genius, which is called a bull market when stocks go up, to feeling like I'm a loser. And then I disciplined myself, went out and built it again. And this time I said, I'm going to do it right. And I invested in real estate. Little did I know I was getting in right before the biggest crash we've ever seen. And unlike the stock market, I couldn't push a button to get out. So I got wiped out. This time I lost 100%, everything I owned. And I believed at that point that like God was punishing me, you know? And it was really the best thing that ever happened to me, because the circumstances caused me to end up living in a forest with a guru. In fact, I think I have him here on the screen here. Let's see if I have him over in the bottom. Yeah, the bottom right here. This is when I went up there. It's Guru Dev, and he's the founder of Kripalu and also Amrit Yoga. And I was invited to come live up in the ashram for a year or longer. And basically I could do dishes and work and for free. And then they would feed me and teach me yoga and so forth. So I was like, well, I'm broke. I'll do whatever it takes. So I went up there and I spent a year, and what I learned was amazing. I didn't understand that everything is energy. And I started to realize really what I had done all my life is chased money. I had chased things. And obviously when you chase something, what's it do?
Runs away.
Runs away. And even if you catch it, it's waiting to get away, isn't it?
Yep.
So that's really what I learned. And so I learned yoga and yoga nidra, which is a yogic sleep. And it's kind of like meditation laying down. And I started to have a catharsis of energy release. And you enter this fourth state called turiya, which is beyond the sleeping, dreaming, and waking state. And it's the state of ever-present presence. And as I began to experience myself, not as my persona or as my roles or anything that can be defined by the senses, I started to understand more who I am. And so the journey for me became understanding that all of us are already everything we've ever needed, and that the wealth is us. And by chasing, it just shows that we really don't know who we are. And of course, we're programmed that way in society. I mean, I was programmed as a kid, as we all are, with a lot of viruses. And then you get programmed by society, the news, constant flow of information. And it has us always running around chasing in the environment of capitalism. And it's not a bad thing. It's just that I think we get anchored to it. We get attached to it. And all of a sudden, when we build our house up on this belief that I'm a great person, I'm a speaker, and I'm a, you know, financial expert and this and that, and then all it takes is one thing, wipes it all out. And that can happen. It's happened to me twice. But then you have to know who you are. And I didn't know who I was. So that kind of led me, after I left the forest, I had a new way of looking at life. And automatically, when I left that forest, I started to get calls, and people wanted me to speak for them, like Damon John from the Shark Tank, which you see here on the left, and Kevin Harrington. So I started to have opportunities come to me where before I had to chase them. And it's just because I realized that I provide a value to the world, and we all do. And once we find that value, we can actually offer it to the world. And if we go out to the world to give instead of take, if we really go out with that intention of my purpose on this planet is to give, because if I am abundant, then basically my goal is to give more value. And obviously that's a new thing to experience when you've spent your whole life in lack, thinking I don't have enough. But this has been my journey. So I started Authentic Elevation to help people discover and acknowledge that, first of all, we're programmed from the time we're children, some of which are good programs, some of which are very bad programs, but we're programmed, and these viruses can be installed, but they can also be removed. So then what I want to do is teach people how to activate a a stronger pathway in their neural highways, how to activate neuroplasticity, and how to use their brain and their emotions in a way that supports them toward their goals. You know, a lot of people don't start their day off by visualizing or by feeling the emotions of what it is they desire. And therefore they start their day just like they did yesterday by grabbing the mobile phone or a cup of coffee or whatever, and they're just back into the program. So the key is to start our day and to end our day feeling inside of us as if we already have everything we desire, because we really do. And this is, I think, the magic, Dr. D and Rhonda and everybody. And I didn't know this until I really sat with this. Everything we always want, when we go spend our time, money, blood, sweat, and tears working hard for something, we might get the car, the house, the gold medal in the Olympics. What we really want is a feeling. That's all we want. We want to have a feeling of something inside of us that makes us feel connected or significant or whatever it is, loved. And therefore, I learned along the way that we can have that feeling without anything outside of us. And so what I desire to do and what I do with my clients is help them to discover who they are. And I think once you're operating from the who I am, as if not the I, the small I, the little persona or the little ego time. The one that, if you ever sit still and listen to yourself, you have a little voice talking to yourself. Have you ever noticed that? In fact, I used to see people talking to themselves outside on the street and I thought they were crazy. And now they're just on a mobile phone. Everybody does it. But really, we all talk to ourselves. It's just the difference is a lot of us don't use our mouths. We talk to ourselves in our heads. And we got to ask, who is it that's doing the talking and who is it that's watching and analyzing the talking? And so as we start to really put our attention on that, we'll start to discover who we really are behind the persona, the masks, the roles, and all these things have been layered on us through the filtered past. And that is really powerful because then you have a freedom and a break free and you start to achieve. And now when you go out to serve the world, you're going out to serve knowing that you already have everything you need. You're already truly abundant. And like Fred says, we're healthy. Our core being is healthy. Our natural, true nature, our authentic self, that is health. That is abundant health, abundant relationships, abundant love, abundant wealth. That is who we are. But then we take on these lack thinking. We start doing things like eating bad foods and hooking into bad habits. And then we start to block that energy flow. And so I've learned along with energy, like Tesla says, everything is energy, harmonics, and vibration, frequency. So if that's what we're made of, then we got to come back to that source. And that's really what it's about. So this is kind of my work. My life's work is to help wake people up to who they are. Because once we know who we are, we start operating in presence instead of living in the future. Instead of living in the past, we start to be present. And all opportunity, all connection, all love, all wealth is right here, right now. But we're too busy in our heads thinking about what we're going to do tomorrow that we miss the person that comes up that's supposed to be there to bring us to the next opportunity or the next direction. So the key is to slow ourselves down. And that's not easy, especially if you're a personality like I am. But I do two hours a day of meditation, and it makes a huge difference. And there's a lot of different techniques I teach. So if you are interested, I've just written a book called Unleash the Possibility Within. And you can request that at help2elevate@gmail.com. help2elevate@gmail.com. And they'll have more information there. And I appreciate you and I appreciate everybody here. And I'm glad to be part of this great little mastermind.
Thank you so much.
Vince, that was really fantastic and very eye-opening and also very relevant to today's times. So really appreciate that. Thank you very much. So our next guest is Mrs. Cheyenne Kramer, and she is the CEO of Triangle Solutions Alliance and co-founder of We Care Partnerships Network. We Care is currently creating community action teams in multiple communities to bring wellness to the many instead of the few. Please welcome Mrs. Cheyenne Kramer.
Thank you so much, Rhonda. I appreciate you inviting me, and it's such an honor to meet you, Dr. Danielle, as well. And what an honor to sit amongst such an amazing group of people here today. I was trying to figure out where I wanted to start, but you know, I've been investigating and working with different types of holistic kinds of strategies for probably about 30 years now. But it didn't all really come home to me until about a decade ago, when my husband had been running a business very successfully from home, you know, six-figure income kind of thing. And he had time, flexible time to be able to spend with our sons. He was their basketball coach, their baseball coach. He was able to do all those kinds of things. And you know, just we had things in a pretty good space at the time. And then, you know, and it sounds like a lot of folks here who have gone through some kind of interesting challenges. Well, we did too, because he started to have some health challenges that kind of brought him down a little bit. And unfortunately, the more we talked about it, the more he said, you know, I just don't think I want to keep doing this work. It was, you know, pushing and pulling on a lot of really heavy machines. And we made some mistakes in terms of how we let that business go. But the bottom line of it was that income we thought we were going to have for quite some time suddenly disappeared from underneath us, and we went through a huge financial crash. And this was only about a decade ago. And in that time, several things happened. For one, you know, we found out how important it is to be looking at safeguarding your health and learning how to take better care of ourselves in the short term, so that you don't go through that kind of scenario later on. But we also ended up coming face to face with just to see how the system keeps people caught in what we call the poverty trap. And, you know, it was mind-boggling to us to really be able to witness it and see what was happening to so many people. And so we determined, after a little bit of self-reflection, that the best way for us to heal from not only what my husband was going through physically, but heal from, you know, just the financial crash and the emotional stuff that went along with that, was to start to take the knowledge that we had gained through his entrepreneurial experiences and some of my own as well, and figure out how to pay that forward. And so over this space of several years, we found ourselves teaching entrepreneurship in local jails, in homeless shelters, working with at-risk youth. And my husband had a special passion for the youth, and you know, they were amazing to work with, because they were still moldable, and most of them had this desire to be a value creator, and you know, they wanted to create something of their own. They wanted to go out and build something. But unfortunately, too many of the youth we worked with, because our school systems weren't teaching them about entrepreneurship of the legal variety, an awful lot of them would take to the streets and learn the kind that we really wish they wouldn't. So, you know, that has become a huge part of our mission. And out of that, again, understanding that a lot of the communities that we have been working within have experienced a lot of the emotional trauma and such, like we just heard about. And if you don't find ways to help them deal with that and the effects on body, mind, spirit from that emotional trauma, then being a successful entrepreneur can be quite challenging. So, you know, these are the things that have all kind of integrated together in our world, so that now, through our community development division of our company called We Care Partnerships, that's where we're developing community action teams. And right now, you know, one of our claims to interesting fame is the fact that we're living in a motorhome. We're parked in Indiana right now to work with a group here that actually is one of our community action teams that we're working with. Their goal is to build a tiny home community on the property where we are here, and be able to put, you know, a roof over people's head that need it, be able to provide them with entrepreneurial training, vocational training, helping them to become self-sustaining, but also incorporating all of this health and wellness kind of thing. Just understanding how important that's going to be to their success. So we've got multiple teams that are actually coming together online right now. We have 2 meetup groups, and we're building virtual teams, and we've been honored to have you join us from time to time, Rhonda. That's been awesome. And you know, we've got the team that's here. We've got a team that is forming back in North Carolina, which is kind of our home base. And that team is actually really interesting because, you know, we're trying to, as I heard somebody else talking about solutions, that's what we're all about, is we try to bring together a bunch of small business owners from the health and wellness arena. And we like to really play in the alternative, you know, complementary medical, shall we say. And we bring a lot of those folks together so that they can become a team that's creating a full-scale solution for the people that we're working with. So as an example right now, we found just before we left North Carolina a couple weeks ago, we found an organization there that is very interested in working with us. They do a lot with youth from the Latino communities, the African American communities, from a lot of low income communities, and they are very interested in having us bring in people who can help the kids with entrepreneurial skills, but they also understand the value of health and wellness empowerment for these young people. So as an example, you know, we're putting together, we've started introducing some of our wellness team members. We've got somebody getting ready to go in and teach those kids about essential oils. We have a gal who's a certified therapeutic drummer who's going to go in there and help them with stress and anxiety issues through the drumming. We've got, you know, just a lot of folks who've got lots of different pieces to the puzzle. There's another gal, I haven't been able to quite get her into the group yet, but I'd love to have her. She actually she helps people heal through doing art, just, you know, painting and expressing their emotions through art. So those kinds of things are what we're trying to bring together, along with, you know, if we can bring along chiropractors and acupuncturists and things like that, and naturopathic folks, you know, we love to do that as well. So right now the team is kind of just starting to grow, just getting itself together. We meet every other Friday on Zoom through a meetup group, and we're building that as a membership. So we've got our health and wellness team, we got our basic needs team, we've got a peace and justice team, and we have a prosperity team. So those are the 4 different community action teams that we're bringing together. And we're also starting to create a fund. Now, this particular organization is willing to pay our small business owner members to come and bring these services and products and such to the youth. So that is an amazing thing to have found them. But we're also starting to take contributions into We Care as well, and we trade for, you know, doing some promotional and advertising stuff for folks, because we want to have a fund so that if we go into a community and we can't find an organization that is either in the position to or willing to raise funds to pay our wellness folks, we still want them to be able to get paid out of that fund. You know, we may even end up buying some products out of that fund and such for some folks, because, you know, our big vision, our big mission that we're working with, that we talk about all the time, is more health, more wealth, more peace for people at all levels of our society. That's what we're all about. And people can find out more about us through our website, and they can go to wecare-partnerships.com. And you'll see our vision. We're calling them paradise communities. We're actually, you know, starting to pull all these people together so we can have stakeholders that are small businesses in a community to help create these better health, wealth, and peace type of communities. And, you know, you'll find a lot of stuff on that website for sure, but that's the best way to go about contacting us. There's a way right on the front of the page that you can let us know if you're a fan of what we're doing, and we'd love to be able to talk to more people about it.
Thank you so much, Cheyenne. Oh, and especially for joining the show. I know that you travel a lot, so I was like, oh, I hope I can get you on. But thank you for joining us. Thank you for your mission and helping so many people. Really appreciate that.
Thanks.
All right, our next guest is Reverend Matthew Gardner, and his fiance passed away from terminal cancer just recently, back in April of 2020. So our thoughts and prayers go to him too for that. But through the releasing process that he learned from his mentor, Matthew was able to release all of the stress and naturally process the variety of emotions that he experienced, including anger, frustration, sadness, and grief. As a result, he was inspired by his fiance's passing to keep moving forward and discover life's work in helping others to experience permanent happiness without a taint of sorrow. Please welcome Reverend Matthew Gardner.
All right, thank you, Rhonda. Yeah, I appreciate your kind thoughts for my fiance, Gail. She was definitely the light of my life and continues to be so. And the interesting thing that I found about her passing, and I mean, I'm 33 years old. She was older than I, almost 20 years older than I, although no one would have ever guessed that, seeing us together. And I've always thought about the idea of like hanging on to our loved ones when they pass. Maybe because we don't want to forget the memories. We don't want to forget the positive emotions that we had. I really don't know, but that was just kind of the normal thing. But I guess I've always been kind of different in that respect. I was never a big emotional person growing up because I learned to suppress my emotions. I grew up in a lot of fear, a lot of anxiety, and I looked cool and calm on the outside, but on the inside, no, not the case. And it was only, 5 years ago when I first met Gail that I really started to explore those emotions and let them out. And she taught me how to love. And it was really the most amazing relationship I've ever had. And in her passing, I realized that in letting go of the grief and the sadness and the anger and the frustration, and this was during COVID, so lockdown. So she was admitted to the hospital. I saw her for a couple of weeks, and then after that time, she was locked down, and then the cancer progressed very quickly to the point where she had a tumor growing in her brain, and she just became incognizant. And so I wasn't getting any phone calls from her or texts. She wasn't responding to my texts. And then, before we know it, she's in palliative care, and at that point, she was just too incognizant to communicate. So at least for the final week of her life, I could see her, but she wasn't cognizant. But, that obviously brought up a lot of grief and sadness. And like I said, I was never like a real emotional person. So I had no idea all the, stuff that was inside of me that was just like coming up in waves and waves and waves. But I continued to release. And I learned this process through I call him my ethereal mentor, Lester Levinson. And he really achieved what you might call enlightenment in the last century of what we're living in here now, of our history. And he just went all the way with it. His back was up against the wall. In 1952, he had a massive heart attack for the second time. And prior to that, he'd had a myriad of other major ailments. And at the time, they didn't have the medical technology to sustain his life. So they basically said, you've got like 2 or 3 weeks to live. Just go home. Don't do any physical activity because it could kill you sooner. And just get all your affairs in order because you're going to pass. And Lester was obviously perturbed by that, annoyed, upset, frustrated, but he just had nothing better to do but lay in bed. And he started to examine his thinking, as he put it. And he realized that it was all the disapproval and the judgment and the unloving thoughts and feelings that he'd hung on to his whole life towards himself and towards others. That's what caused his stress. That's what caused his illness. And so he just determined within himself to let go of all of the unloving thoughts and all of the unloving feelings. And he did this 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. He was just in New York City, in isolation, similar to what we've been going on through here. And within 3 months, his body completely restored itself to perfect health. And he lived another 40 odd years without ever needing to see a doctor. And soon after that, he found financial freedom without needing to, nose the grindstone or, put in the, blood and sweat, so to speak. Just came very naturally. And when I discovered his process, and I said, look, I've been on the spiritual journey for more than 10 years. I've never known someone that was alive like in the last 100 years that achieved enlightenment. It's kind of been my pursuit. Kind of thought maybe I'm crazy. Like, is that just a fantasy? Is that even real? Most of that's in the East anyway, from the Eastern culture. But when I heard about this guy, Lester, I'm like, okay, well, if he can do it, I can do it. And so I just determined within myself to let go, to go through his process. And as I did that, and I had a wonderful supportive community to assist as well, and I let go of the grieving and the sadness, and it would come up and with Gail. And the sooner it got to her transition, I found that I was actually feeling a lot of love and a lot of appreciation and really enjoying it, almost in a sense of it being like a spiritual experience rather than it being a loss. And interestingly enough, and this is, you know, potentially a little strange, but it was my experience, the morning before she passed, I was actually awoken at like 5:30 in the morning. My computer turned on, started playing a YouTube video. And normally I don't get up at that time, so I just let the video finish playing. And after it finished playing, I suddenly got this like thought stream in my mind, and it wasn't like my own thoughts. It was just this kind of separate thought stream, and it started like dictating a letter to her mom, because my mother-in-law, we were staying here while we were caretaking for Gail. And it said, "Dear Mom." And it went in to say like why Gail had chosen to pass at this time, and talked about kind of like a soul agreement type of thing or something along those lines, and even gave like specific advice for her mom's health, because her mom had some health issues. And I'm like, well, that's, you know, kind of strange. Like I've never had such a direct experience with spirit ever before. And I'm like, it crossed my mind that maybe I should get out of bed and write this thing. But I'm like, you know what? I don't usually get up this time. I'm going to wait. Then instantly, when I decided not to get up, I had this intense pressure in my left ear. And then my body just started getting really, really warm and overheated, and I was, you know, too uncomfortable to sleep. So I'm like, I guess that's a sign to get up and write this thing. So I wrote the letter, and I had a lot of like hesitation and resistance to giving it to her mom, because I'm like, I've never done anything like this. I don't know how her mom's going to respond, but I kept feeling the push to do it. So I did. And her mom received it really well. It brought a lot of comfort to her mom. It really brought a lot of closure to the experience of why Gail was, you know, passing at such a young age. And subsequently, I got other messages for close friends and family around Gail's passing. And for the most part, it was like received really well. And, you know, some people, it brought them a sense of comfort or tears of, you know, kind of just understanding. And again, as I continued the releasing journey, I realized like the communication, it doesn't really end. It just takes on another form. And, you know, to this day, I can still feel Gail's presence. In some ways, I love her more than ever, because I just continue to release on any of the disapproval or judgments that I had in the relationship. And, you know, in some strange way, it's like the relationship's even better now, because she's helping me, she's guiding me. I mean, I know I'm in the right place at the right time, because, you know, Fred Van Loo has been in his expertise for 43 years. Gail's magic number is 43. And I see it wherever I go, and she's always showing me this. And it's just a sign that, hey, I'm in the right place at the right time. And really the idea of like giving a voice to spirit, they're here for us, process of releasing, where I was able to open it up. So for anyone that's looking for a higher level of awareness of spirit, or on the journey of enlightenment, as tall order as that may seem, I encourage you to check out the releasing process. And you can email me, freedomwithmatthew@gmail.com. Matthew has 2 T's, freedomwithmatthew@gmail.com. I'll give you my complimentary releasing guide along with a quick start video. And for anyone referencing the interview here, I'll actually give you a one-on-one releasing session, which is approximately 45 minutes, and we'll go into it. You'll actually have the experience rather than the theory and just the story. You can actually experience it for yourself and get that greater insight and open your mind and heart to higher levels of awareness, consciousness, beingness. And if Lester can do it, we can do it. He said, first we master the world, then we master the mind, then we become a master. If that's the journey you're on, that's the journey I'm on, and I'd love to walk the path with you. Thank you.
Oh, thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Reverend. Our last guest is definitely going to knock your socks off. Mr. George, and he changes people's mindsets to accept their failures as positive rather than understanding their failures as negative. He is the CEO of Failure Is Not the Problem, LLC. It's a consulting company that specializes in leadership development and training, life coaching, and motivational speaking. He is a United States Army retired colonel, who has over 30 years of experience as an internationally known communicator, coach, mentor, teacher, trainer, intuitive counselor, inspirational speaker, TV co-host, author. He is a former university assistant professor with. Please welcome Mr. Milton.
Goodness gracious. Hey, Rondea, how you doing? Dr. D, how you doing?
Hi.
Golly, man. What an absolute wonderful opportunity it is to visit with you ladies today. Rondea, she was going through that, man. I'm like, who's she talking about, right? That's got to be something else. Hey, go ahead. I'm listening.
Sorry, my bad.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I'm sorry. I was, okay, so.
No, it's okay.
It's more about you, Mr. George Milton. Please tell us more about you.
Yes, ma'am. Well, look here. What an absolute wonderful opportunity it is to get to see you again, Rondea. It's always a pleasure and a joy to see such a bright, brilliant, happy-go-lucky individual, man. I always enjoy seeing your messages and receiving your emails, and just this opportunity to see you once again is just amazing. Let me start off by saying thank you for an awesome opportunity. And if you hear thunder in the background, that's not the Army rolling again. That's actual thunder. Okay? So I've got a major thunderstorm here. So, but yeah, wow, where do I start? I guess at the beginning. And, failure is a major issue for me, because there was so much of it, as part of my life. I started out, and really interesting, one of you guessed a little bit earlier, other than myself, I've never ever met anyone else that's actually failed kindergarten. Hey, woohoo. All right, I got a compatriot here. But that's where failure actually began for me. I failed the first grade, failed the kindergarten, failed almost every single grade thereafter. And the only thing that saved me was the fact that I was an athlete. And because I was an athlete, I was pushed on the way, right? So my objective at some point was to actually become a professional football player, play for the Dallas Cowboys and all of that. But I barely graduated high school. And, I'm getting ready to graduate, and I would be the first graduate of high school in my family. And the counselor comes to me and she says, hey, you're not going to graduate on time. I'm like, I'm sorry? You're not going to graduate on time. I'm not going to graduate? No, you'll graduate, but you have to come back to summer school. You're not going to be able to walk with your class. So I'd done my whole life, all this failure, right? And I'm just giving you the short and down dirty of it. But I'm in high school, getting ready to graduate. My family background is I come from uneducated parents. Both were teenagers when I was born, just abject poverty in East Rural Texas. So a lot of that going on. So, they were really counting on me to become the first graduate of high school. And I get there, the counselor says, hey, look, you're not going to graduate on time. You will be able to graduate, but you'll have to come back during the summer months and actually take a class in order to graduate. And I said to her, no, that's just unacceptable. I mean, I can't do that. So I need to be able to graduate. And she said, well, there's just not the possibility of doing so. Well, after about a couple of months of just going back and pleading and crying and all of this, she said, okay. We've got to work around. I think this will work. So what she had done is she had actually gone and gotten a correspondence course for me to be able to take so I can get that extra credit. Because up until that point in time, they were just giving me, a passing grades, So I said, hey, look, well, can't you just give me this one credit out so I could graduate? No, you have no more eligibility. So therefore, you're not going to graduate. But we got to a workaround, correspondence course. Well, I couldn't even spell correspondence. That's how awful it was, right? So after she explained what a correspondence course was, I thought, well, that's pretty easy, right? You give me the book or whatever it is. I take the class and I'm done. Couple of problems with this scenario. One is that the course of title was botany. Well, at that point in time in my life, I had no idea what that was. Botany? I said, what is that? And she says, well, it's the study of plants. And before I could even think, I said, well, who would want to do something like that? Study plants for what? What's the point in that? So she kind of explained, that, portion. Okay, fine. It's a hard science. I'm barely graduating. I got a 1-point-something GPA. So how difficult could it be, right? Then she adds, an icing on the top of the cake, and she says, Oh, by the way, it's from Stephen F. Austin State University in Nacogdoches, Texas. It's where? Stephen F. Austin State. Oh, okay. So you got a high school kid who can barely read, who can barely write, who has to take a correspondence course in a hard science and something he'd never heard of from a university? What are the chances, man? So I go, and a couple of months of just crying every night and trying to figure it out. I never told my parents, right? So I kind of pushed through this thing, took it, passed it with a D, got it, and on to college, baby. So I got that, that D, so I'm squared away, and I get to college, and took all the physical education classes I could. After a year and a half, guess what happened? Failed out of college, right? By the time it was all said and done, I had fallen out of 6 universities before I'd ever received a degree of any type. So I failed out of college. That was my impetus for joining the Army, right? But initially I thought, well, I want to be in the Air Force. I want to be an Air Force guy. I didn't come from a military family. What do I know about the military? So blue uniform to look pretty good. So I went and took the ASVAB about 3 times, and every single time I failed the ASVAB. So I went back and I thought, goodness gracious. Now, what happens here is each time you fail, you have to wait for 6 months. So look at that time that actually clocked up on the calendar there. So I'd gone and said, okay, I can't get in the Air Force. Now I'm going to try the Army. And it took me a couple of tries to actually pass that dadgum ASVAB low enough with the score to be able to get into the Army. And that's how I actually started my Army career. So you take this kid, failed almost at everything he'd ever done. And today, I have, 4 degrees, 2 masters, 17 hours toward a doctorate. I was told I'd never be an officer, got accepted in Officer Candidate School. I was inducted into the Officer Candidate School Hall of Fame in 2018, and just been doing all kinds of great and wonderful stuff along the way. But that's the short and down dirty of part of my career and that sort of thing. But along the way, just tremendous amount of failure. I was told multiple times throughout my life that you'll never amount to anything, you'll never be anything. And it was very, very difficult to actually hear. So what had happened along the way while I was in the Army, what actually transpired was I'd gotten so sick and tired of failing so much, I just figured out that, you know what, I need to figure out how to take this failure and transform that into something positive. No one ever taught me that. The only person that gave me an impetus that might be an ideology was a guy by the name of Staff Sergeant Gaither, George Gaither. He was my platoon sergeant. We call them platoon daddies. And I'd gone to the weapons qualification range. Growing up in East Texas, our survival was based upon the ability to be able to hunt and eat, and that's how we got our food. So I could shoot pretty well. But I go to the rifle range, and I bolo the rifle range. Failed the rifle range. Are you kidding me? So I was down in the dumps, and I go to the barracks later that night, and Sergeant Gaither saw me, and he says, hey, look here, Private, what's wrong? And I said, I didn't do as well as I wanted to today. I boloed. He says, number 1, you're going to get an opportunity tomorrow. Number 2, pick your lip out of the dirt. Son, nobody wants to hear that. Number 3, Milton, you can be anything in this man's Army if you work hard enough. He says, failure, that's not the issue here. He says, what you do with your failure. That's the issue. So it all depends on what you do with this. And I remembered that at one point in my life, and I literally transformed the way in which I thought about failure and how I see it today. So I realized that failure really doesn't exist. I mean, think about this for a second. Failure and fear are 2 things that doesn't really exist. I'll talk about failure because that's what I specialize in. But failure never existed until we were told that it existed. When children go out and they try different types of things, right? What they do a couple of things. One is that they either accomplish the mission at hand, or they just say, I'm tired of this, and move on to something else. It's not until it's beaten, drummed into their psyche that failure even becomes an issue. So we get so inundated with this sort of stuff that people are like, well, man, I don't even want to deal with that. So now what do? One of the things I do oftentimes is when I'm speaking to folks, I ask them this question, in one word, define what failure makes you feel like. And without question, the 2 terms that come to mind to folks is they either say it makes them feel disappointed or depressed. Look at the problems we're having in our world with depression, right? I looked at some statistics a couple of weeks ago, and it says that if you look at rural areas where Native Americans are, when it comes to mental illness and how depression is actually impacted, it's almost non-existent in the Native American community, where people even go to actually have this ailment looked at. Within African Americans communities, 30% are actually go and get healed. 33% for Latinos. 1 out of every 2 Asians, don't even seek mental health awareness and help because of the language barriers. Now, those percentages is compared to the average in the U.S. is 43% of the folks who are actually going and trying to get help references. So I was depressed for quite a bit because of this failure thing. So I really wanted to change how people viewed it, saw it, see it, and really experience it. So I say that in order to be able to become successful, he or she must walk through the doorway of failure. And failure is simply an experience, right? We label it all these other things, but all it is really an experience. In my book, Failure is Not the Problem, It's the Beginning of Your Success, I chronicle 17 different power players within the confines of our nations. Oprah Winfrey's, Steve Jobs, Bill Gates, Steven Spielberg, and some others. But every single one of those persons had one thing in common. They had all failed. But they didn't allow for their failures to define who they were. They used their failures to propel them to where they are today. So my failures has actually allowed for me to become all that I could be, and took me from where I was to where I am today.
Oh my goodness. So how then do you want to make a difference in people's lives? I mean, you touched on it, but do you have a system or program, or how are you actually reaching?
Yeah. Look, where is it? It is the question, how do I get people to change their mindsets and embrace and accept the failure?
Even start, right?
Yeah, okay. Well, look, so it's interesting enough to me that when we look at success, we automatically assume that success is a right and an entitlement, right? Especially in our nation. And it really isn't. So if one wants to be successful, here are some things that they can do. Number one, in my book, there's a 12-step program that tells you how to change your mindset from the beginning to the end, to change your mindset from negative to positive regarding failure. 12-step program that's actually in the book. A short synopsis of that would be this. When people say, well, how do I become successful? Well, number one, this is what you do. You believe that you can be successful in the first place. See, a lot of people say they believe in stuff, but they say they believe because they're expected to say that they believe, not because they believe it. Isn't that interesting? And how that plays out? So you literally have to believe what it is you're actually saying. So if one wants to become successful, you have to get that ingrained in your mindset. Change the way you think about that. Change the way you see it. Change the way the universe actually rewards that, right? So beliefs is important. The next thing that's important is you got to focus, laser light focus. What is it? Some statistics today say that people's attention range is about 8 seconds. But if it's only about 8 seconds, you're not going to be able to focus very much. So it's incredibly important in order to become successful. You got to believe it. You got to focus. And the third thing is you got to work hard, right? Most kids today think they're entitled to be general officers, and they've never even donned the uniform. Dude, what are you talking about? Well, sure, you're a colonel, but yeah, in order to be a colonel, are you willing to do the kinds of things that I had to endure to get to where I am? Most of them would not be. Most would not have the tenacity or the endurance to do so. So believe, focus, work hard, and here's the key ingredient. You have to fail. And once you fail, the process starts over again until you get to the point to where you're successful, right? So in the same way that we focus on trying to look at success as positive, there's no difference when it comes to failure. They're two sides of the same coin. The issue is success, failure is. So we oftentimes think that, well, because I'm entitled to succeed, therefore, I don't even want to have to broach or endure the failure thing. So you have to really do some introspection and understand that in order to be able to change your mindset, it begins with you, number one, and not everybody else in the things that you're inundated with. Most people, I came back from Germany after spending a lot of time there about 4 years ago. And it was interesting to me that in the United States of America specifically, and you could actually look at the world, but generally speaking here in the U.S., I noticed two things that were not happening. Number one, people are not reading. Reading a Twitter thingy or texting, that's not Twitter. That's not reading, guys. So we're not reading and we're not thinking, unfortunately. In order to be able to see failure in a positive light, you got to be able to, number one, read, and number two, be able to think critically, and most of us don't. Now, I say that with a little experience. You know, I did not read my first book until I was in the 9th grade. Never read a book until then. Is that crazy? Now, the book was very powerful for me and very impactful. Now, prior to that, I read comic books, but it's not really reading at the end of the day. So here's how I ended up reading my first book. Now, the title of the book was Of Mice and Men by John Steinbeck. Classic, right? So here is how the English teacher got me to read that book. She says, I want you to read this book, and here's why. And she comes over to me, and she points into the book, and here's what I saw. There were two characters in that book. One was named Lenny, and the other was named what? George Milton. That was the first time I saw my name, George Milton, in print. Is that crazy? That, began my interest in wanting to read. And to this day, you won't catch me without a book. I have an extensive library and all that sort of stuff. General James Mattis, he was the former Secretary of Defense. I worked for him, deployed twice into Afghanistan for him back in 2009, 2010. And it was interesting to me that he was a soldier, and this guy never owned a television. A 4-star Marine who never owned a television. And when you ask that question, he said this. He says, anything that has happened, in the past or that will happen in the future has already been written about. So you need to be able to learn more. So we need to really pay a lot of attention to actually reading and those kind of things. So one of the reasons I am where I am today is because of a lot of reading. Sure, I wanted to get beyond the failure thing because it was very, very traumatic for me in a lot of ways due to the way in which I was reared, due to a lot of the things that were going on. But reading really transformed the way in which I see not only my life, but the world. So I went from where I was to where I am because of God, opportunity, and just a lot of failure. So it's really about attitude, right? Attitude determines altitude. So you can have a negative attitude about failure, or you can have a positive attitude about failure. And for the longest, I had a negative attitude, but I transformed that and to where it's positive, and it's propelled me to be able to go to many, many, many places, to the point to where I've briefed ambassadors on a regular basis. I've briefed parliaments on a regular basis and these kinds of things. And this is from some poor little old country boy that used to talk like this right here and that kind of stuff. You know what I'm saying? And in order to not talk like that, I had to actually go to speech courses because I was giving a class when I got promoted to sergeant, and that's how I spoke. I was teaching this class, and the sergeant comes up to me and he says, "Hey, son, great stuff. You had all your, displays were fantastic, man. Good to go." The problem was no one heard, no one could understand anything you said. So once again, I failed, right? But what did I do? I took the formula that I created, F plus RR equals S. That's failure plus right response equals success, right? So that's the formula I came up with. Those are the formula I typically apply throughout my life when it comes to failure. It's not, it's how we respond. I mean, who was it? I heard Chuck Swindoll say that, life is about 90% of what is it? It's like 10% of what happens to you and 90% of how you respond. And if we lived our lives in those sorts of ways when it comes to failure, man, we'd be a lot further along than what we actually are.
Thank you so much. Powerful story.
Thanks, Dr. D.
So what is the HnW show about? It is about getting entrepreneurs, businesses, professionals together so we can refer to each other. We can learn about each other, about our stories. And now I know if, I know some people who has a lot of failure, I can send them to George. If somebody is grieving a loss, I can send them to Reverend Matthew, etc. If somebody needs good water, I send them to Fred. And we are building a group, the HnW Show on Facebook. So you can all join, and you're going to get a recording of these interviews. And we're not only going to do interviews, we're also going to do training and teaching and workshops. And if you know anybody that would be interested, please let us know. You can either join me, mentor me, drd@gmail.com, or
StopTheJunkRondea@gmail.com. Thank you so much. Thank you, Dr. D, for finishing that off so nicely. Appreciate that. George, you're awesome. Thank you, Cheyenne. Thank you, Reverend Matthew. And thank you, Fred. I appreciate you guys sticking around to the very end. Appreciate everybody and love you, and take care of yourselves. Thank you.